The NFL draft nearly upon us. Our final thoughts on the San Francisco 49ers selections in round one and beyond, our final predictions for the draft, and of course, more talk and speculation about Brandon Aiyuk, a potential trade with Amon-Ra St. Brown now setting and resetting the wide receiver market in the NFL right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love all of our everydayers, and we love it when you are subscribed. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube and wherever you are listening to your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers. Sorry, not doing Peacock and Williamson right now. Make sure you subscribe there, as well as the new Overtime with Brian Peacock channel, OT with BP. We'll go live with Croc during the draft, and we'll be live on Eric Crocker's YouTube channel as well in the second round of the draft. So make sure you subscribe to all of those places. Today's episode brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and that's why I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go. It's the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Okay, Croc, another day, another bit of news about Brandon Aiyuk. And I said on yesterday's pod that it was going to be the last big Brandon Aiyuk news pod, because the next pod about Brandon Aiyuk would be he either gets traded during the draft or he signs a big extension. But there is a bit of NFL news which pertains to the 49ers and might add fuel to the fire for a potential Brandon Aiyuk trade. And we do know now that the 49ers are at least listening to offers. Amon-Ra St. Brown signing a 4-year, $120 million contract, lots of guarantees with the Detroit Lions, kind of resetting the wide receiver market. And now we've seen two really big contracts this offseason for wide receivers, and we still haven't seen CeeDee Lamb, still haven't seen Justin Jefferson do their deal, and obviously we haven't seen Brandon Aiyuk do his deal yet. There's other potential deals, T. Higgins, potential trades that could happen. It's going to be a crazy offseason for wide receivers, and really my immediate thought isn't so much about a Brandon Aiyuk trade when I see the Detroit Lions re-sign Amon-Ra St. Brown. My thought is immediately, why aren't the 49ers trying to hurry up and get this deal done before all these other deals start rolling through? Because Brandon Aiyuk's price only goes up from here.
I think one thing that's more and more apparent, again, as much as the 49ers want Brandon Aiyuk to be the long-term guy, right? They want him to be a 49er. I don't think they want to pay him the same amount as some of these other receivers and what they're getting. St. Brown, who just signed a big contract extension, kudos to him. He is really used and featured in that offense. Now, they run the ball a ton with Gibbs and Montgomery, but a lot of the offense goes through St. Brown. They move him around. He plays outside. He plays in the slot. He's going to get his 11, 12 targets, right? Like, he is a big focal point of what they do. And that's not the case for the 49ers with Brandon Aiyuk. So I think the way the 49ers are looking at it is like, man, we love you as a football player, and we want you and what you do on our team, but not at the price tag of these other guys, because we don't use you that way. And that might be the hang-up. So even when we see these numbers, I think it makes it tougher. I think the agent of Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers get further apart on their negotiations. I think the 49ers will tell you, well, because you have a 5th-year option you have to play on, and push come to shove, we'll franchise tag you the following year. So they kind of have them by the cojones a little bit, but it doesn't make the situation any easier for the 49ers if they're not looking to pay him now, $27 million? Because St. Brown got $30 million a year, 77 guaranteed.
Yeah, part of the problem too is just we need to wait and see what the actual dollars are and what the actual structure is, because there's guarantees and there's actual full guarantees, right? There's guarantees for injury. There's numbers that are just turn out to be flat inflated versus and these are the agent's numbers that come out first, right? So the numbers that Ian Rappaport reports out there, those are coming from the agent side. When we actually see what the numbers are, maybe it looks a lot less. Maybe it makes a lot more sense to pay Brandon Aiyuk closer to what this contract is. And I do think that Brandon Aiyuk would not get as much money as Amon-Ra St. Brown because of how they're featured in their offense and what they've done, how they've produced so far in the NFL throughout their careers. I think a better comp still for Brandon Aiyuk is Devontae Smith. Now, Brandon Aiyuk might not see it that way. And if Brandon Ayuk's camp is asking for $30 million a year, I know why the 49ers haven't signed him yet. And they shouldn't just give him that just because he's asking for it, right? And that's why this thing may drag out a little bit longer. And it might be why they might be more willing to listen to a trade offer if they think it's going to be a really tough deal to get done, and that they might not end up getting it done because it gets a little bit more difficult if you go through the season on the fifth-year option, which is obviously an option for the 49ers. Because Brandon Aiyuk, don't forget, still under contract. Then they have the franchise tag, and it could, go a lot of different ways from here. I don't think the 49ers want to do that, but that's their biggest strength in bargaining, is that they're, you can ask for something crazy that we're not going to give you, and we'll just not do a deal, and you're under contract, right? So, if the 49ers don't want to do a deal with Brandon Aiyuk and want to play hardball, they can absolutely do that, and Brandon Aiyuk will play for the 49ers on his fifth-year contract at some point. I don't think it's going to come to that, but that is one avenue, and that's where the 49ers are bargaining from. So, and obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't have a fifth-year option. He wasn't a first-round pick. So that, shortens what that rookie deal would be compared to Brandon Aiyuk with the extra fifth year on his deal.
Also, when you talk about the bargaining chips within that, I think the 49ers can also utilize that in the trade value, right? They still value him as a piece of this offense and what he does to help them be a Super Bowl caliber team. So any team that wants to trade for him, we're not just going to give him away just because we can't come very close on the contract right now. We hold him. We have kind of this power over what happens. If you don't want him for, you don't want to give up a first round pick, and we'll talk about Ben Albright's, what he kind of predicts or whatever with his mock draft and a trade there. But if you're not going to do something like that, we will keep him. So you go ahead, draft a receiver at whatever pick you want to draft a receiver, and you don't know if he's going to be good or not. We know what Brandon Aiyuk is. We know what value he brings to our team. Unfortunately, the way Kyle Shanahan sees the offense, and I say unfortunately for Aiyuk, it's just not pass first. It's run, things through the run, things that set up the pass through the run, and then you start to get to Brandon Aiyuk. And that's what I think the holdup is.
On the subject of Brandon Aiyuk and a potential trade in the draft, Daniel Jeremiah dropped this today or Tuesday, or what I don't even know day of the week it is. So Wednesday is when he dropped it on Twitter. We're recording this later Wednesday. And he said that the two teams that make sense to him are the Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars. He said he's run through the all the scenarios and the things that make sense to him with the 49ers potentially trading Brandon Aiyuk, and the teams that make sense on the receiving end for Brandon Aiyuk would be the Indianapolis Colts, who have the 15th pick in the draft, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the 17th pick in the NFL draft. And I think those are picks that the 49ers would be asking for in trade. Do those teams make sense to you? I don't know why you wouldn't consider the Steelers, who are at 20, as part of this for Daniel Jeremiah. So he doesn't really elaborate on it. He just says those two teams, and I don't know if it's because of what he's hearing or if it's because of what makes sense to him, if he's putting his GM hat on for all of these teams. But I don't know how the Steelers aren't coming up more, because they're just a few picks after the Jags, and they have the receiver need as well, and they're not paying an expensive quarterback or an expensive wide receiver right now. So you would think under their cap and under their team building strategy, Brandon Aiyuk would fit really nice in Pittsburgh as well.
I think, especially after losing Deontay Johnson, or they traded Deontay Johnson, or whatever happened with him. But that was a guy who I felt like a big piece in their offense, and maybe he, had some frustration start to kick in, and it's like, man, just kind of get me out of here. I'm done with whatever y'all going through at this quarterback position. I don't want any parts of it. You obviously still have Pickens, and he's a terrific receiver, but you would like a Brandon Aiyuk and Pickens. Pickens needs someone that complements him in a different way with the game that he plays. He's kind of a contested catch guy, not as much high volume guy, and that's why Deontay Johnson, I felt like, worked so well. But adding Brandon Aiyuk takes that to an even higher level. And Deontay Johnson, good receiver as well. I think he's in the same class as Brandon Aiyuk. No, Deebo Samuel. Brandon Aiyuk.
2017 Deebo Samuel class. Yeah. He went a few picks in the third round, I believe, after DK Metcalf went.
There we go. Yeah. So like him a lot, but he's gone. So how do you figure out a way to kind of bolster your receiver room? And it is potentially trading for a guy like Brandon Aiyuk.
Because the Colts and the Jags have already done work in free agency, and the Colts just paid Michael Pittman, who's from the same draft as Brandon Aiyuk, right? He just got paid. So you'd be putting a lot of money in wide receiver. Now you got a rookie contract quarterback, and that's what you're trying to help out. So obviously it's not crazy money that they'd be dropping, but they'd be paying two big wide receiver contracts the same offseason. I don't know if that makes as much sense. And I think at 15, you'd be much more likely to have someone like Brian Thomas Jr. there for you to actually pick yourself. The teams that would be more interested are the teams that are outside of the top receivers in the draft, probably, that think that Brandon Aiyuk's better than what's left for them in the draft. So let's get a little bit more into that. What makes sense, our predictions for a Brandon Aiyuk trade, if it happens, and our predictions for the 49ers draft next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told I am a competitive person. I know that Croc is a competitive person, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, and it's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part is messing with your friends, though. You can charge rent on those iconic Monopoly properties. You can heist their vaults of riches. You can knock down their buildings. And, of course, you can climb the leaderboards. You can also work with your friends as well to climb those Monopoly leaderboards. So get in the game right now and join your friends with Monopoly Go. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And I know it's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball is in full swing as well. And at FanDuel, you can place your bets on all of those games, every single game in every sport. But it's draft time as well. And there are tons of draft props. And it's probably my favorite way to play FanDuel all year long is those NFL draft props, because I think I have an advantage over the house. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks to NFL draft picks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. As for trades, Croc, you mentioned the Ben Albright mock draft, and he's a pretty plugged in guy and has some sources somewhere around the league in NFL front offices. And he projects an interesting trade. The 49ers going up with the Jacksonville Jaguars, as Daniel Jeremiah mentioned. And what's interesting is that mock draft was written before the Daniel Jeremiah stuff came out. So maybe they're starting to hear the same thing. Is Trent Baalke talking to John Lynch about a potential Brandon Aiyuk trade? Because Albright had the Niners trading up to 17 with Brandon Aiyuk, or not trading up, but trading the Brandon Aiyuk for the 17th pick and selecting a wide receiver right there out of LSU, Brian Thomas Jr., 6'3", 4.33 speed, a downfield weapon. Does that receiver even fit Shanahan's style if he was to trade Brandon Aiyuk to the Jaguars for 17?
Well, when I saw that at pick 17 and they took the receiver, not a huge fan of forcing anything, right? I think 49er fans, they get at me because I'm not forcing an offensive tackle, even though I would love to have one. But at 31, it's like, it's got to be offensive line. And it's like, I'm not big on forcing things. And I definitely wouldn't want to force a receiver at 17 just because in that scenario, you trade away Brandon Aiyuk. So for me personally, I'm looking what offensive linemen are available. Is Fataanu available? Am I making this trade if Fataanu is not available? And looking at Benjamin Albright's board, Fataanu went the pick before the 49ers to, I want to say, Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, Seahawks are 16.
Yeah, so, at that point, like, I'm sorry, Brandon Aiyuk, but you're not going to get paid any more this year because I'm not trading you if the guy that I would want on the board is not there. And then also, when you look at what they traded for, and I think this kind of is reminiscent a little bit of the Deebo Samuel situation. Deebo Samuel stayed a 49er. a lot of people look at that like, oh, see, he was never going to go anywhere. No, the trade offer just was not good enough. So here was the Deebo Samuel situation. They tried to trade pick 10 overall, but they wanted a pick swap. They wanted pick 61 in return. So the 49ers would have had pick 10, and they would not have picked again until late in the third round. We're like, so no, we value Deebo more than that.
Yeah, this was the 2022 draft, right?
Yes.
And the New York Jets, the 49ers would have basically packaged both Deebo and 61, their second round pick, which is the first selection they had in that draft, to go up to number 10.
Right.
Right. And look, Garrett Wilson would have been real nice. That was the pick in that spot, by the way, by the New York Jets. And he'd have been a nice fit for the 49ers. And you could argue whether or not that would have been worth it. But this is a similar trade, which is just a flat no for me, with a pick swap on top of pick 17. The 49ers would have been basically utilizing Brandon Aiyuk to move up from 31 to 17 just to draft a receiver. And that's a big, big no for me.
And the 49ers only get outside of pick 17, and again, using Aiyuk to get up, he has the Jacksonville giving the 49ers pick 116. So, I mean, what is that, a fourth round pick? So
the 49ers already have 3 fourth round picks. They don't need another one.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, we're going to trade Aiyuk to move up to draft another receiver just to absolutely not. Like that's one of those scenarios where it's like, yes, he is for sale. Yes, we would like to have pick 17, but we're not doing it this way. Like where we feel like, how does this benefit us? Because we just get rid of Brandon Aiyuk. We don't want to get rid of Brandon Aiyuk.
Right. Yeah, that makes no sense. If it was for 17, I think you're talking, right? And that's what the 49ers are asking and should be asking. There was a report, remember a few weeks ago, which might sound like it has a lot more validity than at the time, where there was a reporter in Jacksonville that said she heard the 49ers asking price was 17 plus wide receiver Zay Jones from the Jaguars. I think that's more in line of what John Lynch is probably asking for. A pick swap is a huge no. It's very reminiscent of the offseason 2 years ago with Deebo.
If you told me right now that pick 17, you get Zay Jones, who I think Zay Jones is a solid receiver. I think he could work well in the 49ers offense. Is he a replacement for Brandon Aiyuk? No, but he'd be solid. Like if he had 700 yards at the end of the season and 4 touchdowns, like would I be surprised? Not at all.
Yeah, gives you a veteran player to plug in now, and then you still draft a guy that you're trying to develop for later.
Yeah, and you still can't, but at least you still have pick 31. But if you're saying, oh, we'll give you 17, but we're taking Aiyuk and pick 31, I'm out. I'm out. I'm sorry, Brandon Aiyuk. I'm not trading you for that.
Oh, dude, if I'm the Jaguars, you could turn 17 into pick 31, still have a first round pick, and get Brandon Aiyuk. That's insane. Like you'd be doing backflips if you're a Jaguars fan in that situation.
Now, I did have someone on Twitter in the comments ask me, what do you think about this scenario? And it was a pick swap plus a second round pick. At least I'm intrigued by that. Like I can think about that, because then at least I still have 3 picks in the first 2, 3 in the first 2 rounds. I still have pick 7, or let's say, I think it was the Steelers in this scenario, but I have pick 20. And then I have 2 second round picks. And then my late third. I'm more intrigued by that. Would I just pull the trigger on it? I don't know. Again, if you're telling me Fatano is there, now we're talking about trading Brandon Aiyuk for a legit long-term, potentially right tackle or left tackle, because he plays left tackle at Washington, and I get a second round pick. That's a little bit more enticing. It gets me to think a little bit more. Like that's just not a for sure no.
Right. No, I totally agree. And so that's why, and look, and that's why I think it's unlikely that a team like the Colts or the team like the Jaguars would be willing to trade for Brandon Aiyuk, because I think the asking price is probably too high. But the folks around the league must be talking. There must be a reason. Like the Colts must be trying to go get a wide receiver. The Jaguars must be making a lot of calls about getting wide receiver, or else those teams' names wouldn't be thrown out. Because to me, the Steelers make a ton more sense as a trade partner. Or I think if I had to guess which team trades for Brandon Aiyuk, it would be the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers don't have a first round pick. So you might be saying, wait a second, Peacock, they don't have a first round pick. You know what they do have is pick 33, the first pick in the second round. They also have pick 39, right? The 8th pick in the first round. They've got
second round. 8th pick in the second round.
They got 2 picks in the second round. 33 plus 39 is worth more than Steelers pick 20 by itself. So they could put together a package, I think, that would entice the 49ers that gives them first round value, even though they don't have a first round pick, whether it's packaging a future pick with 33 or something like that. And I think they have the most need cap space to make a move. They need a veteran wide receiver. They need a now wide receiver for their young quarterback. And I'm surprised that we're not hearing about the Panthers and wide receivers right now. And I guess it's just because they don't have a first round pick, so they're not in all the first round mocks. But I think the dark horse team for Brandon Aiyuk is probably the Carolina Panthers. Now he would have to want to sign a deal there too. So maybe that's a big no from Ayuk's camp potentially, because that's a very different offense now that you're in, and a very different team that you're on now, even if you get a little bit extra cash if you're Brandon Aiyuk. And
as talented as Bryce Young is, like, is he going to be good? Maybe he is, but maybe he's not. I know one thing. Hey, with the 49ers, I do have a good quarterback. So I like my rapport with my quarterback in San Francisco. Do I want to sign a long-term extension? Which definitely, like, they would have to iron out the details of a contract or potential contract prior to making the trade. Because if you trade for him and he's like, I'm not re-signing with you guys, then now you're just in the same position as the 49ers. 5th-year option, maybe franchise tag him, but nothing is solidified with Brandon Aiyuk long-term, which is what he's trying to get.
Next, it's prediction time. What will the San Francisco 49ers be doing Thursday night and Friday and Saturday in the 2024 NFL Draft? Next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role that you're looking for. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn just isn't some job board, right? LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. We're talking about 2.5 million small businesses that use LinkedIn right now for hiring. And they just launched tons of features that help you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker for your hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Prediction time, Croc, for the 2024 NFL Draft. Will Brandon Aiyuk be traded?
No. I don't think that a team will meet the demands that the 49ers have. And the 49ers, again, they don't have to do this.
Yes, right. It's not. I would bet that it doesn't happen, but it feels much more likely today than it did a month ago, right?
100%. Remember, my percentages was 70% he plays on 5th-year option, 20% he gets a new contract, 10% he's moved. I'd bump that 10% up to 25% right now. Now, still, you have a much more chance. Again, you got 75% chance he is a 49er to some extent. There's 25% chance, which is much higher than 10%.
So I put a tweet out earlier Wednesday, and it said this. By the way, going back to Daniel Jeremiah, he had some other intel. He said everyone he's talking to, people are trading up for offensive tackles. That might be the 49ers. That might be the Kansas City Chiefs at 32, trying to get in front of the 49ers and a bunch of other teams. That might be might be the Steelers. The Steelers need an offensive tackle. By the way, my guy, Matt Williamson, we've talked about this. Like, what would a Aiyuk trade look like? And he's like, man, that first round pick, I don't think is going anywhere because the Steelers want an offensive tackle with that pick. And so it's the Steelers. It's there's so many good tackles in this class, but there's so many teams that need an offensive tackle as well. So they're going to fly off the boards. Teams might be going up to try to get them.
Real quick, can we talk about that? I mean, or just bring this up. I like that you talked about that with the focus on offensive tackle around the league. Everybody looks at McKivitz like it's just this terrible offensive lineman and it's so easy to replace him. John Lynch said it in the press conference yesterday. They're struggling with offensive linemen around the league. This is not an issue exclusive to the 49ers. So when you have McKivitz, and everybody pushes back on me, I'm not saying this guy is great, but he is serviceable to the point. And someone brought up some great points. Man, they had to run away from him. They had to run to the left side all the time. They figured out a way to be serviceable with him out there. And you rode that to the Super Bowl. All right. So obviously this is a guy that you would love to improve over. But the rest of the league is thinking the same thing. Why is everybody trying to trade up for these tackles? Why are so many tackles projected to go first round? Because everybody's tackles, they have the same issues as the 49ers. So I'm glad. I just wanted to say that because I'm glad you brought that up. It's not as easy as just draft anybody and it's going to be good. The entire league is having trouble finding guys that are good on the offensive line. Forget just tackles, guards. That's why they're getting paid so much on the market now. Offensive guards are getting paid a premium because it's hard to even find good guards as well.
Pickens are going to be slim at 31 for the 49ers at offensive tackle, and I hope they don't force it. And they've done enough work on their roster where I don't think they have to force it, and they can go best player available. Maybe they do move up. Maybe they do move back, Croc. But I get the sense right now that if the 49ers stick at 31, there's not going to be a really clean option for them at offensive tackle. And so I don't think I would predict that they take any offensive tackle necessarily at pick 31. So if they are at 31, what's the prediction? Who do the 49ers draft in the first round of the 2024 NFL draft, Croc?
I think it's been clear you and I were on the same page with this, right? You want the right guy, not just a guy. And we've kind of narrowed it down. There's a couple guys I would love to be on the board. I've talked about Cooper DeJean. I think he's a day one plug-and-play guy in the secondary. He'd be an impactful player. I would love to have him. I don't quite foresee him being there at 31. Hope he is. And we're talking about him at safety/nickel. We called him Palen Ramsey, all right? We're not talking about him being an outside corner, a.k.a. Jason Sehorn out there. So I don't foresee him being there. And then you go straight to another position where you feel like a guy can make an impact. And both of us landed on the defensive line. Different guys. I kind of landed more on Robinson. I like the value of that. A lot of people don't. Wouldn't quite need that at pick 31. You really like Johnny Newton, who could come in and be someone that complements Javon Hargraves extremely well. But so if I had to guess, you're probably landing in the market of one of those two guys potentially.
Yeah, I would put like Kool-Aid in there as well as a potential pick for the 49ers, but they've done some work. And if you just read the tea leaves, they've brought in a bunch of veterans. And I think if you look at who's on 1-year deals, who's on 2-year deals, looking down the road, defensive tackle is where I land here with where I would put my money on who's going to be there, Johnny Newton. And so I'm gonna guess Johnny Newton at 31, and you're gonna get, and I think these are the sort of the chalky picks. Like I think Johnny Newton and Darius Robinson should be the betting favorites for the 49ers, and then maybe Chop Robinson and Kool-Aid McKinstry after that. Like those 4 guys, I think are the most likely like potential best players on the board available for the 49ers. I'm gonna throw one more out there though, Croc, because I think this is really worth a discussion, and that's Jackson Powers Johnson. I'm gonna add him as the 5th guy, because I've seen him slide. He was like kind of a lock first rounder. I've seen him kind of slide in mock drafts a little bit. Graham Barton seems to be going ahead of him a lot when you're looking at the like the center types, the interior offensive linemen. Wouldn't it be smarter to draft somebody that you think, even though it's not the most highest position value, or maybe fans out there are going to erupt if they don't draft an offensive tackle in the first round? Isn't it smarter if you think, man, there's a guy who you think is an all-pro center? Wouldn't you want to draft that guy over what you think is maybe you're just kind of settling on a guy who's not as good at the offensive tackle position?
I think definitely. And I think as I'm playing things through my head, we talked about Robinson. We talked about Johnny Newton. They did throw a lot of resources. We talked about outside cornerback with Kool-Aid McKinstry. They brought in a lot of free agents for those spots. Edge, they brought in multiple guys. Interior defensive line, they brought in multiple guys. Cornerbacks, they brought in multiple guys. Center, they brought in No, nobody.
Guard, they brought back at least Feliciano on a 1 year
They
deal.
brought back Feliciano, but that's not
Tackle did nothing. They added a year to Colton McKivitt's contract at a dollar amount that says he's not a starting offensive tackle in the NFL. They gave him swing tackle money, right? So they're going to draft an offensive lineman. The question is it in the first round or not?
I'd say they would do well. And I also saw a chart. It shows like hit rate on positions for the first round.
Yeah.
More like highest and lowest percentages of players hitting. The hit rate on centers that are drafted in the first round is the highest out of any other position.
Yeah. There was one miss and this was based on, so it's a little bit imperfect. It's based on that player signing a second contract with the team that drafted him. So for example, Brandon Aiyuk, if they trade him, would be a miss because the Niners didn't re-sign him. He's clearly a hit. DeVorce Buckner is listed as a miss. He was clearly a hit. There's not that many of those. Like TJ Hawkinson was traded, and so he's part of the miss category for the tight ends, but he would be a hit, I think, So there's some that it's not perfect, but the top three positions are guard, center, tackle, or center, tackle, guard, or something like that in a row. So it's like it's the best hit rate is the offensive lineman in the NFL draft. The worst hit rate is wide receiver, by the way.
Interesting. Which is why
under 50%.
Which is why are more teams not banging down the door of the 49ers to try to get Brandon Aiyuk?
Which is why if you end up with a top 20 pick, we're probably shouting at him to draft an offensive tackle with that pick and not a wide receiver with that pick and attack wide receiver later, maybe just multiple times, especially the sweet spot seems to be in the second round right now for wide receivers in the NFL.
Day two, if you have the ability to pour some, especially the early day two,
right?
I feel like second round is rich.
That's the spot.
With, and especially like those top 15 picks in the second round to be able to get a receiver that can come in and really contribute.
I kind of want to make my guess actually Jackson Powers Johnson now that I think about it.
Yeah. I'm
going to change it. I'm going to say Jackson Powers Johnson round 1 is my guess, but those 5 players have a pretty I think it's going to be one of those 5 players, not offensive tackle in round 1, if they stay at 31 and they don't move up or down, which I think is a big possibility as well. What's your percentage on the Niners picking at 31?
Or remember, I give a higher percentage of the 49ers moving down.
Yeah, this was our bet, right? I think it's a better 50% chance they stay just because it's more likely to stay than make a trade. But maybe the 49ers are more likely to be one of the more mobile teams. I still like the idea of moving up on day 2 more than from 31, because I think one of the 5 players I mentioned are going to be there, and I think they'd be a good draft pick at 31. Then you go up and get that tackle, right?
If they want Jackson Powers Johnson or Jackson Powers Johnson, right, and he's the only guy that's like him, and he's sliding down, I can see them say, "Oh, we got to move up to 24 to get this guy." He's the only one that's like him, or maybe Grant Barton. But
I tweeted out earlier Wednesday, since pickings are slim at offensive tackle, I don't think they'll go offensive tackle, as I just mentioned. And I do think the 49ers will end up with one of these 4 players, Croc. This is my prediction. Kingsley Suamataia, we've talked a lot about. Roger Rosengarten, Blake Fisher, right tackle from Notre Dame, who was the bookend with Joe Alt, who's going in round 1, and then Caden Wallace, who was the right tackle at Penn State, who's the bookend with Olu Fashanu, who's going to go in round 1 at right tackle. So Kingsley Suamataia, Blake Fisher, and Caden Wallace all came on 30 visits for the 49ers. Roger Rosengarten, the 49ers went to Washington and had a private workout with him. Now, one of those guys could be the pick at 31, but I think their plan, if I had to guess, is they're looking at more round 2 guys here, and they're going to go somewhere else, best player available in round 1, and then round 2, they're hoping to either, or maybe round 3, to draft one of these 4 players, or maybe even move up to maneuver the board to get one of their tackles there. That's my prediction right now, Croc.
I can see that. This is going to be fun, man. This next 24 hours, very nerve-wracking for not just a lot of 49er fans, but a lot of Laker fans, because we got a chance to go 0-3 in this series against the Nuggets, and I'm excited about that. Do I watch it? I can't even watch the Lakers-Nuggets playoff game. I got to watch the NFL draft, man. But it is going to be exciting for it's an exciting day for me for a lot of different reasons.
All right. Well,
anxious.
I'll be rooting against the Lakers, and I'll be rooting for the 49ers to blow our minds. And I know John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, when they get in their office and they start talking, they come up with some wild stuff that we don't expect. So always expect the unexpected when it comes to the NFL draft, and make sure you are subscribed right here to Locked On 49ers. We're going to break down all the picks after they happen, but you also have to be subscribed to Eric Crocker's YouTube channel and Brian Peacock's YouTube channel, OT with BP. On my channel, we're going to be going live during the first round of the NFL draft, breaking down everything that's going on with the picks, waiting to see the 49ers move up, move down, what they do, and have a live reaction to the 49ers selection in round 1. And then in round 2, we'll be on Crocker's channel, and we'll be doing the same thing there. So make sure you are subscribed. Those are YouTube only. We'll be doing long lives and answering chats and super chats and having all kinds of fun on draft day at those channels. And who knows what we'll be doing in round 3 and beyond. Maybe we'll do it up again on one of those 2 channels. But make sure you're subscribed there. We're pumped for it. The NFL draft is here, and we will talk to you then everywhere, including Locked On 49ers.